If you've ever scrolled through British social media lately, you've probably seen the same phrase over and over, getting out of the UK. It's not just talk anymore. In 2023, more British citizens left the country than arrived for the first time in over a decade. We're talking about a net loss of nearly 86,000 British passport holders in a single year. That's not foreign workers going home or international students finishing their degrees. That's actual British people packing up and leaving permanently. Young professionals are moving to Australia and Canada. Retirees are heading to Spain and Portugal in record numbers. Families are choosing Dubai, Singapore, anywhere that promises a better quality of life. The numbers tell a story that's hard to ignore. I recently visited Manchester and I noticed something odd walking through the city center on a Wednesday afternoon. There were "We're hiring" signs everywhere, but also closing down sale signs in equal measure. Coffee shops, desperate for staff next to boutiques that couldn't survive. The city felt like it was caught between two different realities. In one of the pubs, I got talking to a bartender who told me half his friends from university had already moved abroad. He was looking at Melbourne himself, said he could make double the money there and actually afford to rent a decent place. He wasn't bitter about it, just matter of fact, like it was the most obvious decision in the world. The emigration isn't just happening quietly either. There are entire online communities now dedicated to helping British people relocate. Facebook groups with hundreds of thousands of members comparing visa processes, job markets, and cost of living in different countries. YouTube channels with names like Escaping the UK pulling in millions of views. Reddit threads where people share their emigration timelines like they're planning a holiday. This is a mass movement that's picked up serious momentum in the last few years, and it's accelerating. In early 2024, searches for how to move to Australia and emigrate from UK hit all-time highs on Google Trends. Estate agents are reporting that a growing percentage of sellers specifically mention they're liquidating to move abroad, but it wasn't always like this. Back in the 2000s, England was the place people wanted to move to, not away from. The traffic was going in the complete opposite direction. When the European Union expanded in 2004, over 1 million people chose to make Britain their new home within just a few years. London was being called the capital of the world. The economy was growing. The NHS was considered the envy of nations. British universities were pulling in talent from every continent. There was this sense that if you wanted opportunity, if you wanted to be part of something dynamic and forward-looking, you came to Britain. The country had momentum. Now that momentum has not just slowed down, it's reversed entirely. The question isn't whether people are leaving anymore. The question is why so many are making that choice right now, and whether anything can actually stop it. Back in the early 2000s, England was the place people wanted to move to, not away from. This was the cool Britannia era, when London felt like the center of everything that mattered. The city was regularly ranked number 1 in global city indexes, beating out New York, Tokyo, and Paris. The financial sector was booming. Tech startups were sprouting up in East London warehouses. The creative industries were thriving in a way that made other countries jealous. If you were ambitious and talented, London was where you needed to be. The energy was real, and you could feel it walking through Shoreditch or Soho or Canary Wharf. The NHS back then was genuinely something to be proud of. Wait times were manageable. You could get a GP appointment within a few days, sometimes the same day if it was urgent. Hospitals were being modernized with new equipment and facilities. In 2000, the government announced the biggest sustained increase in NHS funding in its history. New medical schools were opening to train more doctors. Nurses were being recruited internationally because Britain was seen as a great place to practice medicine. The system had its problems, sure, but it worked. People from other countries would point to it as proof that universal healthcare could actually function at a high level. Housing was expensive in London even then, but it was still within reach for normal people with normal jobs. The average house price in 2002 was around £120,000 nationally. In London, you were looking at maybe £250,000 for a decent place. Those numbers seem almost fictional now, but back then a couple of young professionals could actually save for a deposit and buy a flat without family money. First-time buyers were typically in their late 20s, not their mid-30s. Renting wasn't great, but it wasn't the financial black hole it would become. You could rent a room in a shared house in Zone 2 and still have money left over for going out and saving a bit. The universities were pulling in the best minds from around the world. Oxford and Cambridge maintained their elite status, but places like Imperial, LSE, and UCL were competing globally for top academics and students. International students wanted to come to Britain because a British degree meant something, and because the experience itself was valuable. The student visa system was relatively straightforward. After graduating, there were clear pathways to stay and work. The message was basically, come here, learn, contribute, maybe build a life. Between 1997 and 2010, the number of international students more than doubled. I remember visiting London in 2012 during the Olympics, and the whole city felt like it was showing off. The infrastructure improvements were visible everywhere. The transport system worked. New developments were going up in every borough. There was this genuine sense of optimism, like Britain was building towards something better. Danny Boyle's opening ceremony celebrated the NHS, multiculturalism, and British innovation in a way that felt earned, not forced. Other countries were watching and trying to figure out how to replicate what Britain had built. Then things started to change. Slowly at first, then much faster than anyone expected. Today, walking through many English towns feels different. I also discovered just how many high streets have completely changed when I spent a few weeks traveling around smaller cities last year. In town after town, the same pattern kept showing up. Empty shop fronts with "To Let" signs that had been there so long the paper had faded in the sun. Charity shops filling the spaces where regular stores used to be. Coffee chains surviving while independent businesses shut down one after another. The high street in Middlesbrough had entire blocks that felt abandoned. In Stoke-on-Trent, I counted 14 empty units on just one street. These weren't always struggling towns. 20 years ago, these same streets were busy with shoppers, families, people actually spending money and enjoying their town centers. The weird backrooms feel is everywhere now. You know that sense when a place should be full of people, but it's eerily quiet. That's what a lot of England feels like in 2024. Shopping. Centers built for crowds that don't come anymore, bus stations with routes that got cut, community centers that closed down and never reopened. I visited a leisure center in Blackpool that had half its facilities shut off. The swimming pool was open, but the gym area was roped off with old equipment just sitting there behind the barriers. Nobody using it, nobody maintaining it, just slowly gathering dust. It looked like someone had planned to fix it up and then just gave up. The NHS tells the same story when you actually try to use it. I needed to see a doctor last autumn and called my local surgery at 8 in the morning, exactly when they opened. The line was busy for 40 minutes straight. When I finally got through, the earliest appointment was 3 weeks away. For anything non-urgent, you're looking at months. The waiting list for hospital treatments hit 7.6 million people in 2024. That's more than 1 in 10 people in England waiting for some kind of medical care. Emergency. Rooms have people sitting in hallways because there aren't enough beds. Ambulances queue outside hospitals for hours because there's nowhere to take patients. The buildings themselves often look tired. Peeling paint, old furniture, equipment that's clearly been patched up too many times. Housing has become the thing everyone talks about, but nobody can fix. The average house in England now costs about 9 times what the average person earns in a year. In London, it's over 13 times. That means if you make £35,000 a year, which is close to the typical salary, you're looking at houses priced around £315,000 nationally. To buy one, you'd need a deposit of at least £30,000, which would take most people 7 or 8 years to save if they're lucky. Rent isn't any better. In cities, rent can easily eat up half your paycheck before you've bought food or paid for anything else. I know people in their 30s still living with roommates, not because they want to, but because it's the only way to afford a place anywhere near where they work. A lot of the country feels unusable at this point, like it was built for a different economy that doesn't exist anymore. So what happened? There isn't one reason. It's a combination of things that all hit around the same time and made everything worse. Brexit was the big disruption that changed how Britain connected to the rest of Europe. Whether you voted for it or against it, the economic impact has been measurable. Trade became more complicated. Businesses faced new paperwork and costs. Some companies moved their headquarters to other countries to avoid the hassle. The UK is the only G7 country whose economy is still smaller than it was before the pandemic hit. That's not a political opinion, that's just what the numbers show. Growth has been basically flat for years, while other similar countries recovered and kept moving forward. Then came the cost of living crisis, and this is where things got really hard for regular people. Energy bills tripled in the space of about 18 months. Someone paying £200 a year for gas and electricity suddenly got hit with bills over £300-500. Council tax kept climbing every single year, adding hundreds more to what people owed. Food prices shot up so fast that grocery shopping became genuinely stressful. Inflation on food hit 19% at its peak in early 2023. That meant your weekly shop that used to cost £80 was now costing over £95 for the exact same items. Wages did not go up anywhere near enough to match these increases. Real wages, meaning what your money can actually buy, are still lower than they were in 2008. People are working the same hours or more and ending up poorer than they were 15 years ago. At the same time, the tax burden hit a 70-year high. People are paying more in taxes than at any point since the 1950s, while simultaneously watching public services fall apart. It's not that the money isn't being collected. It's that there's never enough to fix what's broken or keep up with what's needed. You're paying more and getting less, which is basically the worst possible combination. The brain drain started showing up in hard data around this time. Thousands of doctors left the NHS for jobs in Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, where they'd earn more money and deal with less stress. Tech workers figured out they could make double their UK salary by moving to the United States, or even staying remote and working for American companies. Young people graduating from university started looking at opportunities abroad before they even considered staying home. Meanwhile, other countries made themselves more attractive on purpose. Portugal created special visas for digital workers that made it incredibly easy to move there and work remotely. Australia kept running skilled worker programs that basically rolled out the red carpet for British professionals. Dubai offered zero income tax and started positioning itself as a new hub for finance and tech. These weren't just options, they were active recruitment efforts targeting exactly the kind of people Britain needed to keep. Comparison became impossible to ignore. A nurse in the UK might earn £35,000 and wait months for NHS treatment themselves. That same nurse in Australia could earn £65,000 equivalent, buy a house, and actually use a healthcare system that functioned. At the same time, staying in England kept getting harder. The gap between what life cost and what you could earn just kept growing wider. And here's the thing that makes it really tough. The numbers just don't work anymore for most people. It's not about being lazy or entitled or not working hard enough, it's pure math. If you're a software developer in London earning £50,000, which is actually a decent salary, you're taking home about £37,000 after tax. Rent for a one-bedroom flat anywhere you'd actually want to live is easily £800 a month, so that's £18,000. Gone right there. You've got £19,000 left for everything else in your life, transport, food, utilities, going out occasionally, trying to save something. Now take that same developer and put them in Austin, Texas. They'd earn around £120,000, take home about £90,000 after tax, and pay maybe $1,800 a month for a nicer place. That's £68,000 left over, which is roughly £54,000. You'd have nearly 3 times as much money left at the end of each month doing the exact same job. The decision kind of makes itself. The housing crisis is the killer detail that breaks the whole system. The average age for a first-time buyer in the UK is now 32 years old. Think about that. You're spending your entire 20s working and saving and still can't afford to buy a place until your 30s if you're lucky. The deposit alone requires 5 to 7 years of serious saving for most people, and that's assuming nothing goes wrong, you never lose a job, and you basically don't live your life during that time. Meanwhile, rental costs are eating up 40 to 50% of what people earn in cities. You're paying someone else's mortgage instead of your own and barely breaking even each month. There's nothing left over to actually build toward anything. Even the weather becomes a factor when you're already struggling. Why deal with gray skies and rain 8 months a year on top of economic stress? It sounds superficial, but it matters to people when they're weighing their options. If you're going to work hard either way, at least you could do it somewhere with sunshine and better quality of life. Australia offers both higher pay and better weather. Spain and Portugal give you lower costs and Mediterranean climate. Dubai has year-round sun and no income tax. The UK has drizzle and declining public services. Survey data shows this shift in how people feel about the country. National pride, especially among people under 40, has dropped significantly. It's not that young people hate Britain. They just don't see a future here that makes sense anymore. Why struggle to afford a tiny flat in Birmingham when you could have a house with a garden in Brisbane? Why work for the NHS when you could do the same job in Canada for better pay and actually get treated well? Professional emigration numbers tell the story clearly. Around 10,000 nurses left the NHS for jobs abroad between 2021 and 2023. Tech sector departures are harder to track exactly, but recruitment firms report losing thousands of skilled workers annually to overseas opportunities. Skilled tradespeople, the electricians and plumbers and builders, are heading to Australia in steady numbers through dedicated visa pathways. There just aren't enough opportunities or quality of life improvements to keep people here anymore. That's the fundamental problem nobody's really solved. There are plans to turn things around. The government talks about various initiatives to fix housing, boost the economy, and improve public services. Investment promises get announced regularly. New housing targets claim they'll build hundreds of thousands of homes each year to fix the shortage. The NHS gets funding increases in budget announcements. Infrastructure projects are supposed to modernize transport and connect cities better. On paper, it all sounds promising. But then you look at what actually happens versus what gets promised, and the gap is hard to ignore. Take HS2, the high-speed rail project that was supposed to connect London to Manchester and beyond. It was meant to be this generation-defining infrastructure achievement. The plan kept getting scaled back. First, they cut the eastern leg, then they canceled the Manchester extension entirely. What started as an ambitious project to transform British transport ended up as an expensive railway that'll run part-way in cost, way more than originally planned. It's become a symbol of how difficult it is to actually deliver major improvements. Housing targets get missed year after year. The government sets goals to build 300,000 homes annually, but the actual numbers keep falling short. In 2023, only around 220,000 were built. The math doesn't add up when you need millions of new homes to fix the shortage, but can't even hit the yearly targets that would slowly close that gap. NHS waiting lists keep growing despite funding increases because the money never seems to catch up with the demand. You can pump billions into the system, but if you're already starting from a position where millions of people are waiting and staff are burnt out, that money just stops the bleeding rather than actually fixing anything. It's like trying to bail out a boat that's still taking on water. Some positive signs do exist if you look for them. Certain tech sectors in Britain remain genuinely competitive globally. AI research, coming out of DeepMind and similar companies, is world-class. Manchester and Bristol are showing population growth and economic activity that suggests they're still attracting people. Cultural institutions like the BBC, the British Museum, and West End Theatre maintain their global reputation. These aren't small things. Whether that's enough to reverse the trend, who knows? The people leaving aren't doing it because they hate Britain or want it to fail. Most of them would probably prefer to stay if the fundamentals made sense. I've read countless posts from people who moved away, and there's usually this tone of reluctance mixed with relief. One person wrote about leaving for Vancouver after 15 years trying to make it work in London. They talked about how much they missed British humor, their friends, even the pubs, but they also said they bought a house within 2 years of moving, something that would have taken another decade in the UK if it happened at all. Another person moved to Melbourne for a medical job and described the strange guilt of being able to afford a comfortable life doing the same work that barely covered rent back home. For now, England feels like a ghost of what it used to be. If you grew up here or remember visiting in better times, it's kind of sad to see. But it's also a reminder of how fast things can change when economic fundamentals shift and governments can't or don't keep pace with what people actually need. The talent is leaving, the optimism is fading, and every person who goes makes it just a little bit harder for the ones who stay. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My wife said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories about London and the reality of the United Kingdom like this deserve to be told. Help me show her that these videos matter. Please subscribe to the channel, and let's keep these stories from being ignored.